Hi, thank you for allowing me to join you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you for this event and for hosting my colleagues from Veterans for Peace, as well as for having this discussion, embracing, this conversation on the future of Japan as it strengthens its military alliance with the United States. Certainly, it's not a new alliance; it goes back decades. But I think the connotations of it, the contours of it, the shape of it, and the consequences of it over the last 20 years have changed, and especially the last 10 years. And those are only accelerating as we see these alliances being formed, alliances that are a making of the United States' interests in the Indo-Pacific to contain China, to keep China down, and to humiliate China to a degree. I think that what you've seen, particularly say in the last several months, with the number of alliances, the number of agreements, the security guarantees being signed between the United States, Australia, and Japan, United States, Japan, South Korea, certainly the close involvement between NATO and Japan. Your prime minister was just in at the NATO summit in Vilnius last July, the possibility of opening up a NATO office in Japan, all those types of networks that are being laid down, these relationships that are being solidified through agreements. These are always very dangerous. This is what the founding fathers of the United States warned of when they said, beware of entangling alliances. One of the things that you see in this new role for Japan as it becomes a major partner, a major player, a major piece of Washington's strategy in Asia, throughout the Indo-Pacific region, is that Japan will carry on its shoulders much more responsibility, not just for the war fighting, but also for the industry of war. And so certainly, recently just announced new weapon sales to Japan, the joint standoff air-to-surface missile, which is quite a large missile, either a 1,000-pound warhead or a 2,000-pound warhead that can fly more than 1,000 kilometers. Those types of things, of course, redefine, remake the Japanese self-defense forces into something that obviously are not self-defense forces. But just as importantly as these arms sales, right, as well as, again, these alliances, these entangling alliances, these connections to Australia, to South Korea, to NATO, and of course, the United States is already existing connections with a host of other nations, include the Philippines. That moves Japan into a place where it can be pulled into something in the way that dominoes fall, because something happens with the Philippines, which brings the United States in, which then brings in Australia, which then brings in Japan as well. And then South Korea will come in, and then possibly NATO. And of course, the primary opponent in all that is China. North Korea is often used as an example, and certainly North Korea, in terms of issues with its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs, is something that should be dealt with in a diplomatic fashion, not in a military fashion. But this remaking of Japan as a militarist power, as first among the secondary group of nations underneath the United States, because we have to always remember that the United States is primary. So however these alliances pull Japan, it will always be for the interests of Washington and not for the interests of the Japanese public. But so that includes the ability to wage war, and wage war offensively, and to wage war far from Japan's own shores. Another aspect of this, though, that's equally as important is the need of these alliances, the need of this war-making ability, the need of these vassal states for the American empire to also contribute to the war economy, to the industries of war. And, as you all are well aware, there's a debate in Japan over whether or not you should be able to export weapons. And once you do that, once you start exporting weapons, particularly as is being discussed, exporting a new generation of fighter plane, there is so much money involved in that. There is so much profit to be made that you have now begun to create what will become a military industrial complex like the United States that then has a self-reinforcing, circular, cyclical relationship to policy, where the policy of war is meant to ensure the profits of industry. And then the profits of industry are reinvested in ensuring that the policies are for war making. And we certainly see that in the United States over and over again, where the Pentagon puts money into the arms contractors in the United States. The Pentagon budget this year will be $886 billion. Half of that goes to the weapons manufacturers, to the arms makers. And a lot of that money is then put back into things that influence policy, whether it be think tanks that argue policy that is supportive of the war industry. And that's how American foreign policy and military policy is made. That's the advice that members of Congress hear, almost exclusionary. But also, too, that money goes into the campaign coffers, into the campaigns of members of Congress, as well as lobbyists. We have 535 members of Congress, and there are more than 1,000 registered defense industry lobbyists in Washington, D.C. So as you, the Japanese, expand into not just the ability to make war, but to provide the industry, the manufacture, the business of war, this is what you will see occurring in your own politics. It is something that is quite obviously insidious, quite nefarious. And what it does, too, is it takes away democracy. Because what happens is you have your policies set not by what is best for the Japanese public. Certainly their voice is diminished in all this, but what is best either by the interests of the alliances for which you are entered into, the interests of a military that wants to go overseas, wants to fulfill its mission. It has a reason for existing. You see that here in the United States, where the military continually has to prove itself. And that will be something the Japanese military will embrace as well. And then, of course, the profits of war and the military industrial complex that will come if the Japanese government and if the Japanese people allow for weapons to be exported. And so, of course, you can see how all that entangles a nation in the affairs of others, pulls a nation into events with consequences that are nowhere near the interests of its public. So this is a very weighty matter. This is a philosophical matter. This is a very deep political concern because it's not just about the things that Japan will do in the future vis-a-vis its relationship to the United States, to NATO, to its military alliances with Australia, with South Korea, etc., but also, too, more on a political philosophical level. Is this the nation that you want to be? Is this what you want your democracy to become? And I'll leave it there because it is such an issue that I think you have to approach with a deep degree of understanding as to the consequences that come from something as simple as signing an agreement with another nation, to being an alliance, accepting weapons that will be utilized for a purpose far from Japan's shores, as well as, too, exporting weapons that will be the beginning of a military industrial complex. Thank you. I wish I was there with you maybe next year. But again, I really want to say I appreciate you hosting this event, you having this discussion, you hosting my colleagues, and I wish you all the best and thank you for promoting peace.